The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, painting golden lines across the worn wooden table. Grandma Ruth, 72, carefully arranged her favorite teacups, humming softly as she did every morning. The smell of freshly brewed tea filled the room, a comforting routine she had cherished for years. "Morning, Mom," Mark, her 45-year-old son, muttered, barely glancing up from his phone. His tone was sharp, impatient. "Good morning, dear," Ruth said warmly, placing a cup in front of him. "Did you sleep well?" Mark rolled his eyes. "I don't have time for this chit-chat, Mom. Listen, we need to talk about the house." Ruth froze, her hands tightening around the teacup. "The house?" she asked cautiously, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes, the house. I've decided it's time for you to move out," Mark said, his words dropping like stones on her heart. "I need the place. You're too old to be living here alone." Ruth blinked, stunned. "Move out? Mark? This is my home. I've lived here for 50 years. Your father and I built this together." Mark slammed his hand on the table. "I don't care about the past. This is about now. You've got 2 weeks to find somewhere else. That's final." Her chest tightened, and a wave of disbelief washed over her. 2 weeks? That's impossible. I can't just leave everything behind." "Stop whining, Mom. I'm doing this for your own good," he snapped. "You'll thank me later." Ruth's hands shook. She looked at the faded family photos lining the wall, pictures of birthdays, anniversaries, and Christmas mornings. Each memory seemed to mock her now, each smile frozen in time, a cruel contrast to the cruelty in front of her. "Mom, are you even listening?" Mark demanded, his voice rising. I don't understand," Ruth whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "You're my son, my own child, and you would do this to me." Mark shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I told you, it's nothing personal. You'll find somewhere else. There are plenty of homes out there." Ruth sank into her chair, clutching the teacup like a lifeline. The room, once warm and familiar, now felt like a prison. The betrayal cut deeper than any storm or hardship she had endured in her life. Her own son, her flesh and blood, had turned his back on her in the one place she thought she'd always be safe, her home. She stared silently at the doorway as Mark walked away, the sound of his footsteps echoing through the empty kitchen. In that moment, Ruth realized that the love she had given freely for decades had been met with cold, unfeeling indifference. And as the sunlight fell on the floorboards, she whispered to herself, "I never imagined my own son could hurt me like this, but somehow I will survive." Days passed like heavy clouds over Grandma Ruth's life. The house that had once felt alive with laughter now echoed only with silence. Each room was a reminder of her son's betrayal: the living room where Mark had thrown a tantrum, the kitchen where she had poured tea for him, now tainted by his cruelty. Ruth wandered through the house, touching familiar objects with trembling hands. The old rocking chair in the corner, once a throne of comfort, squeaked as she sat, and memories tumbled over her like waves. She remembered Mark as a little boy, running through the yard, laughing as she chased him with playful scolds. She had tucked him into bed every night, kissed his forehead, whispered prayers over him, and now he had cast her aside as if those years of love meant nothing. Her days were long and empty. She tried to reach out to neighbors for support, but even kind words couldn't fill the ache inside. Every knock at the door made her heart race, hoping it would be someone coming to help, only to find it was Mark's friends dropping off packages or letters she didn't understand. Each one reminded her of her displacement. I can't do this alone," she whispered to herself, one rainy afternoon. The sound of rain hitting the roof mirrored the sobs she fought to hold back. She wandered into the attic, pulling down an old quilt that smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. She wrapped herself in it, clutching it like a lifeline, letting the tears fall freely. Loneliness gnawed at her. Even her phone felt useless. Calls to old friends often ended in silence or hurried excuses. "I'm busy," they said, or "I'll come by next week." Words that stung because they never came. Ruth began to feel invisible, a shadow of herself drifting through a world that had suddenly turned cold. Meals became a chore. The small amount of food she could afford barely sustained her, and often she skipped lunch entirely, telling herself she didn't want to be a burden. Nights were worse, dark, quiet, and filled with the sound of her own heartbeat. She would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the confrontation with Mark over and over in her mind. How could her own son, the boy she had raised with love and care, turn against her so completely? One evening, she ventured outside, walking the neighborhood slowly. Every home seemed full of life, families laughing, sharing meals, caring for one another. Her chest tightened with grief. "Why not me?" she muttered under her breath. "Why did he forget me so easily?" She passed a small park and saw children playing, their parents watching with smiles. For a fleeting moment, she felt the pang of loss more sharply than ever. The family she had built, the care she had given, now replaced by empty rooms and cold silence. Tears ran freely down her cheeks. But amidst the sorrow, Ruth's mind began to stir. She remembered her late husband's words. "Never let anyone take what you've earned, Ruth. Your strength is greater than you think." The memory of his voice sparked a tiny ember of hope in her chest. She began going through her personal belongings more carefully. Old letters, documents, and ledgers she had kept for decades, things Mark never bothered to notice, were suddenly treasures. Her heart, heavy as it was, also carried resilience. Every page she sifted through reminded her of her worth, her intelligence, her ability to endure. "I may be alone," she whispered to the empty room, "but I am not powerless. I will not be forgotten. I will find a way." Ruth's days were still painful, her nights still long, but now a seed of determination had been planted. She realized that the betrayal, as cruel as it was, could not erase her. She would endure. And perhaps one day, the world, or at least her ungrateful son, would see the justice she deserved. The following morning, Grandma Ruth sat at her small kitchen table, staring at a pile of unopened letters she had been too weary to sort through. Something compelled her to sift through them now. Maybe it was frustration, maybe a quiet determination that had begun to grow. As she opened one envelope, her hand trembled. It was from her old lawyer, Mr. Coleman, whose name she hadn't seen in years. Inside was a crisp letter, with words that made her heart leap and then pound with excitement. "Dear Ruth," it began, "you may have forgotten our last meeting, but the matters we discussed remain in effect. Your property has been legally transferred into your trust. Any attempt to sell or claim ownership by family members who have not been included in your will be invalid." Ruth's eyes widened, the paper shaking in her hands. Could it really be? She read it again, slowly savoring every word. The house, her home for 50 years, was legally hers, and hers alone. Her ungrateful son, who thought he could evict her without consequence, had no control. Her hands dug into the stack of papers until she found another letter, this one marked urgent. It was a notarized will. She had quietly prepared years ago, a document that detailed how all her assets, including the house, savings, and small investments, would be handled in the event of her death. She had left nothing to Mark. Instead, she had arranged for everything to go to a charity she had long supported, along with small bequests to friends and neighbors who had always treated her with love and respect. Ruth leaned back, a mixture of relief and exhilaration washing over her. The betrayal that had haunted her for days now felt powerless. She had the upper hand, and the scales of justice were finally tipping in her favor. Just then the phone rang. Hesitant but curious, she picked it up. "Hello, Mrs. Ruth," said a familiar, professional voice. "This is Mr. Coleman. I wanted to confirm you received my letters. There have been inquiries regarding your property. Your son, Mark, tried to make a claim. I assured him that legally he has no right. I thought you'd want to know immediately." Ruth's lips curled into a small, victorious smile. "Yes, Mr. Coleman," she said softly. "I received everything. Thank you for handling it. I think it's time he learned that actions have consequences." She hung up, the weight that had pressed on her chest for days finally lifting. The betrayal, the pain, and the loneliness had led her to this moment of discovery. She now had a secret, a power her son could never imagine. And for the first time since the eviction, hope sparkled in her eyes. The morning of reckoning arrived like a storm. Grandma Ruth, dressed in her favorite shawl, walked into the living room where Mark had stormed in, expecting her to be gone. His face was twisted with anger and confusion. "Mom, I don't know what you're playing at, but this house," Mark began, his voice sharp. Ruth raised a hand, her voice calm yet steady. carrying the weight of years of betrayal. "Mark, it's all over. The house belongs to me. And your attempts to claim it are meaningless." Mark froze, staring at her as if he hadn't heard correctly. "What do you mean? I can sell it. I can." "You can do nothing," Ruth interrupted, pulling out the notarized documents from her bag. "This is the property transfer and my will. You have no claim. Everything I leave goes elsewhere." Mark's face turned pale. His hands trembled as he snatched the papers, scanning them, disbelief etched into every line of his expression. This isn't possible. You can't do this." You forget, Mark," Ruth said softly, a quiet strength in her eyes, "that betrayal has consequences. The love you took for granted, the years you dismissed, they matter. And now, so does the justice you ignored." Mark sank into the nearest chair, his anger giving way to shame. "Mom, I didn't mean— You didn't mean to evict me? You didn't mean to abandon me? Words are easy, Mark. Actions are what define a person," Ruth replied, her voice both gentle and firm. "You begged for control, but I was patient. You acted cruelly, and now the truth is out." Tears filled Mark's eyes, the weight of regret crushing him. I never thought I was wrong," he whispered, voice breaking. Ruth's lips curved in a faint, forgiving smile. "It's too late for excuses, but it's not too late for change. Learn from this. Treat others with the love and respect you once ignored. Let this be your lesson." She folded the documents carefully, placing them back in her bag. The tension in the room seemed to lift as if the walls themselves were breathing a sigh of relief. Mark sat silently, humbled and ashamed, while Ruth felt something she hadn't felt in days: peace. Stepping outside, she inhaled the crisp morning air. The sunlight kissed her face, warming her heart. For decades, she had endured love and betrayal, pain and loneliness. But now, justice had been restored. She had reclaimed her dignity, her home, and most importantly, her strength. And as she walked into the garden, Ruth whispered to herself, a smile lighting her face, "I am free. And finally, I am safe in my own home." But if you think that was shocking, wait until you hear what happened when an evil daughter-in-law pushed an old man to the edge, and karma didn't knock. It crashed in. The morning light filtered through thin curtains, casting a pale glow over Grandpa Henry's small, tidy living room. At 68, Henry had grown used to the quiet rhythm of his days, reading the newspaper, tending to his modest garden, and savoring the occasional visit from neighbors. Today, however, the tranquility felt brittle, like glass ready to shatter. "Henry, get up! You're wasting time," barked Linda, his daughter-in-law, her sharp voice cutting through the calm like a knife. Henry stirred from his chair, confusion knitting his brow. "Linda, it's barely 8 o'clock. What is it?" Linda strode across the room, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. "It's late enough. You're useless just sitting here all day. I've told you, you can't keep me waiting for your meals or your company. You need to do something productive." Henry's chest tightened. I've done what I could. I tend the garden, I cook sometimes, Don't eyes me," Linda snapped, cutting him off. "You're lazy, Henry. You've been living off my son's money, and frankly, I've had enough. Stop pretending you're still the man you used to be. You're a burden." Henry's hands trembled slightly, his voice soft but pained. "Linda, I raised your husband. I cared for this family." "I've given everything I could, everything," Linda laughed bitterly. "Everything. You've been lying around, taking advantage of us while we work ourselves to the bone. I've seen the letters, the bank statements, you've barely touched them, and you expect sympathy?" Henry's eyes welled with tears. He felt the sting of betrayal deeper than any physical blow. He had raised this family, supported them, and now he was being treated like a stranger in his own home. Linda stepped closer, her face hard. "I'm serious, Henry. You need to get your affairs in order. I won't tolerate weakness here. From now on, you're out of my way, literally and figuratively." Henry sank into his chair, staring blankly at the floor. Memories of decades spent guiding, supporting, and loving his family flooded his mind. The birthdays he organized, the sleepless nights when his son was sick, the countless small sacrifices he had made. And now, none of it mattered. "Am I just invisible?" Henry whispered to himself, his voice cracking. "After everything, am I nothing? Linda's sharp laugh echoed down the hall as she left the room. "I'll be back later, Henry. Try not to bother me." Alone, Henry closed his eyes, the weight of loneliness pressing down on him. Betrayal burned like fire in his chest, a reminder that even family could become the cruelest of enemies. And in that quiet room with the morning sun filtering through, Henry felt the first flicker of a determination he hadn't known he still possessed. "I will survive this," he whispered, gripping the armrest of his chair, "and I will prove that love and kindness are not weakness." Days turned into weeks, and Grandpa Henry's life became a series of small torments. Every morning he awoke to the sharp voice of Linda criticizing him for the smallest mistake, leaving a cup on the counter, forgetting to dust a shelf, or simply sitting in the living room doing nothing. The warmth of family that he had once known was gone, replaced with a cold, oppressive atmosphere. Henry tried to retreat into the quiet corners of his life. He wandered into the garden, tending to the roses and vegetables that had always been his solace. But even the soil couldn't hide the ache inside. Each plant he nurtured seemed to mock him, reminding him that the love and care he had poured into his family had been met with disdain. At night, the house felt like a cage. The creaking floors and the soft hum of the refrigerator became symbols of his entrapment. Linda's presence was always looming, even when she wasn't physically there. Her words echoed relentlessly in his mind. Lazy, useless, burden. Henry had lived through wars, sickness, and heartbreak, but never had he felt so powerless in his own home. Meals became another battlefield. Linda insisted on controlling everything, what he ate when he ate, and even whether he ate at all. "I won't serve you if you don't earn it," she had sneered one morning, refusing to hand him a plate of food. Henry sat silently, staring at the cold dishes, feeling the sting of humiliation more acutely than any hunger pang. Even neighbors, once friendly, seemed distant. He tried reaching out for help, explaining how Linda treated him, but their pity never translated into action. "She's family," one neighbor shrugged. "Maybe she means well." The words hit him like blows. Family, he realized, could be the cruelest judge of all. Loneliness gnawed at Henry's soul. He would spend hours sitting in the old armchair by the window, watching people pass by in the street. Children played with their parents, couples laughed together, friends met and embraced, and he, who had given so much, was left invisible. He whispered into the silence, "Is this my reward? Years of love, and this is what I get." Some nights, the pain became unbearable. Henry would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining a life without betrayal, a world where kindness was reciprocated. He thought of the small moments he had shared with his son when he was young, the pride in his eyes, the laughter they had shared, and wondered where it had all gone wrong. Yet amid the despair, a quiet determination began to stir. He remembered his late wife's words, spoken decades ago. "Henry, you are stronger than the cruelties of the world. Never forget your worth, even if they do." That memory became his anchor. Henry began sifting through old papers, letters, and financial documents he had kept over the years. Linda had ignored them, dismissing him as senile or incompetent. But hidden among them were investments he had made quietly, small savings accounts, and other assets that she had never bothered to check. A spark of hope lit in his heart. Perhaps all was not lost. Despite the loneliness and relentless criticism, Henry realized he had one advantage: patience and foresight. While Linda had focused on controlling his daily life, she had overlooked the strength he had quietly built over decades, the security he had established through careful planning, hidden from the eyes of those who thought him weak. Sitting by the window one evening, Henry whispered to himself, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands, "They may treat me like nothing, but I am far from powerless. They will see, they will regret underestimating me." And in that quiet, oppressive house, a plan began to take shape, one that would not only restore Henry's dignity, but also ensure that justice, long overdue, would finally be served. One rainy afternoon, Grandpa Henry sat in the dim light of his study, surrounded by dusty folders and forgotten envelopes. The rain tapped rhythmically against the window, echoing the tension he felt in his chest. He had spent weeks enduring Linda's cruelty, mockery, neglect, and humiliation, but something told him that his patience was about to pay off. He picked up an envelope marked confidential, a document he had tucked away years ago after consulting his financial advisor. Inside were account statements and legal papers he had carefully prepared, investments that Linda had never noticed, small portfolios that had quietly grown over the decades. His heart raced as he realized the extent of what he had accumulated, enough to secure his future, and more importantly, enough to regain the power Linda thought she had stolen. Henry's hand trembled as he opened another envelope, this one containing a notarized document from his lawyer. It was a trust, a legal instrument he had established in secret, which controlled not just his savings but his property and assets. The document made clear that any attempt by Linda to seize control would be null and void. He leaned back in his chair, a mixture of relief and excitement washing over him. "So this is the moment," he murmured to himself. "They thought I was helpless, but I've been preparing all along." Just then the phone rang, breaking the silence. Hesitant, Henry picked it up. "Hello, Mr. Henry," said a familiar voice. "It's Mr. First. Sanders, your lawyer. I wanted to confirm that you received the latest statements and trust documents. There have been inquiries about your accounts. Someone tried to access them without authorization. Rest assured, everything is secure and all legal protections are in place." Henry smiled, a quiet, victorious grin. "Thank you, Mr. Sanders. That means more than you know." After hanging up, Henry sat for a long moment, absorbing the truth. Linda, in her arrogance and cruelty, had overlooked the very thing that would ensure her failure. His years of quiet diligence, careful planning, and financial foresight had created a safety net so strong that nothing she could do would succeed. He whispered to himself, a spark of determination igniting in his chest. They think this is over. They think they've won. But soon they'll learn that patience, wisdom, and integrity always triumph over greed and cruelty. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside him, a brewing force, ready to confront injustice. Grandpa Henry's journey of suffering had led him to this moment of revelation, and now the stage was set for the confrontation that would restore his dignity and finally teach Linda the lesson she deserved. The morning sun streamed into the living room as Grandpa Henry calmly prepared his papers, each document a quiet weapon of truth. Linda stormed in, brimming with irritation and disbelief. "Henry, what are you doing now? Trying to hide more excuses?" she snapped. "I've had enough of your laziness." Henry looked up from the papers, his eyes steady, filled with a calm he hadn't shown in weeks. "Linda, this ends today," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of all the months of mistreatment. Linda scoffed. "Ends today? Don't make me laugh. You've done nothing but waste my time and resources. I decide what happens here." Henry stood slowly, placing the stack of trust documents and account statements on the table. "Actually, you don't. These are the documents that prove everything is mine. Every account, every investment, legally protected. Your attempts to control me or take what's mine, meaningless." Linda's eyes widened as she scanned the papers, disbelief turning quickly into panic. "You, what? This can't be." "I manage everything. You overlooked what I've quietly built over the years," Henry interrupted. "I prepared for moments like this. Your cruelty made me cautious. You underestimated me." Linda sank into a chair, her anger giving way to shame. I thought you were weak. I thought I could control you." Her voice cracked. "I never realized you had done all this." Henry's lips curved into a calm, almost forgiving smile. "Weakness is never in my nature. Kindness is not vulnerability, and patience has its rewards." Linda buried her face in her hands, her arrogance dissolved into regret. "I've treated you horribly. I didn't care. Henry shook his head, his tone firm but not cruel. "It's too late for excuses. But it's not too late to learn. Let this be a lesson. Greed, cruelty, and arrogance bring nothing but regret. Integrity, patience, and foresight. These bring justice." He gathered his papers, placing them neatly in his briefcase. A weight lifted from his chest, the months of humiliation, loneliness, and betrayal finally giving way to triumph. Stepping outside into the fresh morning air, Henry inhaled deeply, the garden scent filling him with life and strength. He had endured, he had suffered, and now justice had been served. As he watched the sunlight glinting off the dewy leaves, he whispered to himself, voice steady and proud, "I am free. I am respected." And at last, I am at peace. Linda, sitting silently inside, could only watch, knowing she had been outwitted and humbled. The lesson of her arrogance would stay with her forever. You think family betrayal can't get worse? Then listen carefully. Because the next mother was thrown out by her own child, without knowing she was hiding a millionaire's secret. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the lace curtains of Grandma Esther's cozy living room. At 75, Esther had always treasured quiet mornings, reading the paper, sipping tea, and listening to the birds chirp outside her window. Her peace, however, was shattered by the shrill voice of her daughter, Jessica, 38, storming into the room with an impatient scowl. "Mom, seriously? You can't keep doing this," Jessica snapped, slamming the door behind her. "I don't have time for your nonsense today." Esther looked up, startled, her hands trembling slightly around her teacup. "Jessica, I was just sitting there being lazy." Jessica cut her off. "You've been living off me and Dad's money for months, and now you're expecting us to continue supporting you? Enough is enough." Esther's lips quivered. "I have always tried to help when I could. I cook, I clean, I cook, clean." "That's not enough," Jessica yelled, pacing the room. "You never understand what it's like to struggle. We've sacrificed so much for you, and all I do is what?" Esther's voice cracked. "I raised you, Jessica. I watched you grow up. I gave everything I had for you." Jessica froze, then sneered. "Everything? Really? Because right now I don't see anything but laziness. I can't believe I ever thought you were capable of taking care of yourself." The words hit Esther like a hammer. Her heart felt as if it had been ripped out and trampled. She had spent decades nurturing this family, loving her children unconditionally, and now her own daughter spat at her like a stranger. Tears pricked her eyes, but she held them back, afraid of showing weakness. "Jessica, why would you say such things to your own mother, after everything?" Jessica crossed her arms, her voice dripping with condescension. "Why? Because I'm done being nice. You've been a burden for too long. We've been patient, but patience has limits." Esther sank into her chair, gripping the armrests as if they could hold her together. The room felt unbearably cold, though the sun shone brightly outside. She had never imagined that her own child could betray her in such a cruel, heartless way. You're my daughter," Esther whispered, her voice barely audible, "and yet, I feel like I've lost you forever." Jessica turned sharply toward the door. "I'm not here to argue, Mom. You need to figure out your own life. I can't waste my time anymore." The door slammed behind her, leaving Esther alone in the silent room. She stared at the empty doorway, the weight of her daughter's words pressing down like stones on her chest. For the first time, Esther realized that love alone could not shield her from cruelty, even from those she had cherished most. And as she wrapped her hands around the warm teacup, she whispered to herself, a flicker of determination forming in her heart. "They may think they've broken me, but I will not be defeated. Not now, not ever." Days stretched into weeks, and Grandma Esther's world grew smaller with each passing sunrise. The once lively home, filled with laughter and family chatter, had become a hollow space echoing with silence. Every creak of the floorboards reminded her of the absence of warmth, replaced by her daughter Jessica's harsh words and icy dismissal. Esther tried to find solace in her routines. She tidied the living room, watered the potted plants that had survived decades of care, and brewed tea with the precision of habit. But even these small comforts were tinged with despair. Each task reminded her that her efforts went unnoticed, unappreciated, and unloved. Neighbors occasionally stopped by, offering a polite nod or brief conversation, but even these gestures felt hollow. She longed for someone to truly understand her pain, to recognize the injustice she endured from the person she had nurtured most. Yet their kind words were only fleeting shadows of support, and Esther was left with the quiet echo of rejection. Meals were the hardest. Esther had never been one to demand attention or favor, but now she found herself skipping them, telling herself that she did not deserve the luxury of sustenance. She'd set a plate on the table only for it to grow cold and untouched, a bitter reminder that her existence had been reduced to a burden in her own family. At night, the loneliness weighed heavily on her. She would sit by the window, staring at the street below, watching families laugh, friends embrace, and children play. Memories of her own daughter as a young girl flitted through her mind. Jessica's laughter ringing through the house, the small joys they had shared, and Esther felt a pang of grief so sharp it was almost physical. Her heart ached with the betrayal she could not comprehend. How had the little girl she had held in her arms grown into someone so callous? How could love, nurtured for decades, be met with contempt and indifference? She found herself wandering through old photo albums, brushing her fingers over frozen moments of joy, birthdays, holidays, and anniversaries. Every smiling face, every cheerful memory was now tinged with sorrow, a stark contrast to the cold reality she faced. Yet, amid the grief, a quiet strength began to emerge. Esther remembered her late husband's words. True strength lies not in confrontation, but in preparation and patience. Those who do wrong will eventually face the consequences. Her mind turned to the small pile of letters, papers, and personal documents she had kept tucked away in the drawer of her desk. Over the years she had meticulously saved every statement, every legal form, every small investment she had made, quietly, things Jessica never noticed or deemed important. The realization gave her a flicker of hope. The same resources Jessica dismissed as insignificant could now serve as Esther's shield, her leverage, her means to reclaim dignity and justice. Sitting quietly in the soft lamplight, Esther whispered to herself, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes, I may be forgotten, I may be disregarded, but I am not powerless. Patience and wisdom have been my allies all along, and soon, justice will be mine. For the first time since Jessica's cruel confrontation, Esther felt a spark of determination ignite. Though the road ahead would be challenging, she knew she had the tools to turn the betrayal into an opportunity, not just to protect herself but to finally reveal the truth and claim the respect she deserved. One rainy afternoon, Grandma Esther sat alone at her kitchen table, the sound of raindrops tapping against the window matching the racing of her heart. The weight of Jessica's harsh words, the weeks of neglect, and the sting of betrayal pressed heavily on her shoulders. Yet beneath that sorrow, a quiet determination had begun to grow, a reminder that wisdom and foresight were her true allies. Her hands trembled as she opened a small, dusty drawer she rarely used. Inside lay envelopes and folders she had kept hidden for years, legal documents, bank statements, and correspondence she had meticulously saved. These were the things Jessica had never bothered to notice, things Esther had quietly prepared as safeguards for the future. Carefully, she unfolded a letter from her lawyer, Mr. Reynolds. The words on the page made her heart leap. Dear Mrs. Esther, your estate, investments, and properties are fully protected under the trust established last year. Any attempts to claim or control these assets by family members not included in the will are legally void. Your privacy and assets remain entirely under your control. Esther's hands shook with a mix of relief and excitement. Her daughter, so confident in her own power, had overlooked everything. Every cruel word, every act of neglect, had only reinforced Esther's preparation. She had quietly ensured that her independence and her justice could never be taken away. She sifted through the rest of the documents and found a notarized copy of her will. Jessica, she realized, would inherit nothing. Instead, Esther had designated trusted friends and charities that had always supported her, ensuring that those who had shown kindness would benefit from her lifetime of work and care. Just then the phone rang. Hesitant but determined, Esther picked it up. Mrs. Esther, said a calm, professional voice. This is Mr. Reynolds. I wanted to confirm that your trust documents and recent estate updates are secure. We've had some inquiries from family members, but legally, everything is protected. You have nothing to worry about. Esther exhaled, her chest swelling with quiet triumph. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I think it's finally time they understand that actions have consequences. She hung up and sat back, letting the storm outside mirror the storm inside her, a storm that had begun with pain and betrayal, but was now transforming into empowerment and strategy. For the first time in weeks, Esther felt the flicker of hope turn into a blaze of determination. The tables had shifted, and the daughter who had treated her with cruelty would soon face the truth she had long ignored. They think they've won, Esther whispered to herself, eyes gleaming. But they are about to learn the cost of underestimating me. The next morning, Grandma Esther stood in the living room, her hands folded calmly over the stack of documents that would change everything. Jessica stormed in, her expression a mixture of irritation and disbelief. Mom, I don't know what you think you're doing, but Jessica began sharply. Esther held up a hand, her voice steady and commanding. Jessica, it's time you listened. Everything you've done, every insult, every neglectful act, it all has consequences. Jessica scoffed. Consequences? You think you can threaten me? I run this house, and I've been taking care of you. You've been taking care of yourself, not me, Esther replied calmly. You tried to dismiss me, to control me, to make me invisible in the place I call home. But you overlooked one important thing. I prepared for this. She placed the stack of legal documents and the notarized will on the table. Jessica's eyes widened as she scanned the pages. Her hands shook. What? What is this? These are my trust documents, my estate, and my investments, Esther explained. Everything is legally protected. Your attempts to claim or control them are invalid. And as for inheritance, none of this will go to you. Instead, I've designated friends and charities who have supported me all these years. Jessica's face drained of color. Her arrogance and confidence crumbled as disbelief gave way to panic. No, this can't be. You can't do this. I've been taking care of you. You took care of nothing but your own ego, Esther said, her voice firm but calm. Actions speak louder than words, Jessica. I've endured your cruelty, your selfishness, and now the truth is here for everyone to see. Jessica sank into a chair, tears brimming in her eyes, her bravado gone. I never realized I was wrong, she whispered, voice breaking. I thought I knew what was best, but... Esther's lips curved into a small, serene smile. It's too late for excuses. But perhaps this experience will teach you humility, empathy, and respect for others. Remember this. Those who underestimate love, patience, and wisdom will always face the consequences. The room was silent, save for the soft ticking of the clock. Esther felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in weeks. She had endured betrayal, loneliness, and heartbreak, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and triumphant. Stepping toward the window, she inhaled the crisp morning air, feeling the sunlight warm her face. The storm of cruelty had passed, leaving only clarity, dignity, and justice in its wake. She whispered to herself, eyes shining, I am valued, I am respected, and finally, I am free. Jessica sat in stunned silence, the weight of her mistakes settling heavily upon her, and for the first time she understood the cost of her ungratefulness. That twist shocked everyone, but the next story proves one thing. When elders stay silent, karma prepares the loudest revenge. The morning sun barely warmed the small study where Uncle Sam, 70, sat surrounded by old ledgers and dusty books. He had always been meticulous about his finances, saving and investing carefully over decades, quietly planning for a future that he hoped would be peaceful. That peace shattered when Brian, his 35-year-old nephew, burst into the room, a wide grin plastered on his face. Uncle Sam, you're going to love this opportunity I found, Brian said, enthusiasm dripping from his words. It's a foolproof investment. You just need to give me your savings, and I promise you'll double it in no time. Sam furrowed his brow, leaning back in his chair. Brian, I've heard you pitch ideas before. This one seems risky. Are you sure it's legitimate? Legitimate? Brian scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. Uncle, you worry too much. This is golden. You trust me, right? I would never steer you wrong. Sam hesitated, memories of past generosity filling his mind. He had always tried to support his family, often lending a hand, or money, when needed. But there was something in Brian's overly eager tone that made him uneasy. Still, he had learned to believe in the good intentions of family, and he wanted to believe his nephew. All right, Sam said slowly, reaching for the checkbook. I'll invest, but I want everything documented. I don't want any misunderstandings. Of course. Everything in writing, Brian replied, his eyes sparkling with excitement. You'll thank me later. Days passed, and Uncle Sam watched helplessly as Brian's investment plans unfolded. The checks Sam had entrusted to his nephew disappeared into what Brian claimed were high-return ventures. Calls to Brian were met with excuses, delays, paperwork issues, and promises of soon, Uncle, soon. Sam felt a growing weight in his chest. The man he had trusted implicitly, the family member he had nurtured, had betrayed him. The sleepless nights he spent worrying about his savings were punctuated by a rising sense of disbelief. How could someone he raised and supported manipulate him so thoroughly? One evening, Sam sat alone in his study, staring at the empty folders and blank bank statements. The betrayal stung deeper than he could have imagined. "Brian, how could you do this?" he whispered, voice breaking. "I trusted you, and you just stole from me." His hands trembled as he held his head in them, but beneath the anguish, a flicker of resolve began to grow. Years of patience, wisdom, and careful planning had taught him that even the most unexpected betrayal could be met with strategy and foresight. "I may have been wronged," Sam whispered, his voice steadying, "but I am not defeated. One day, he will see that actions have consequences." Days turned into weeks, and Uncle Sam's life became a quiet nightmare. The investment he had trusted Brian with vanished into thin air, or so it seemed. Each morning he awoke with a pit in his stomach, checking bank statements and documents, hoping against hope that the money would reappear. But each day brought only silence, excuses, and the growing realization of betrayal. He wandered through his home, staring at the photos on the walls. Pictures of Brian as a boy, smiling proudly at his first school award, reminded Sam of the countless times he had supported his nephew. He had been there for birthdays, school projects, and even during the rough patches of life, lending guidance and sometimes financial help. And now, that same family member had manipulated him, taken advantage of his trust, and left him feeling powerless. Sam's nights were worse than the days. He would sit in his study, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation with Brian. "I'll double your savings, Uncle," Brian had promised. "Trust me." The words mocked him now, and Sam felt a mix of shame, anger, and disbelief. How could someone he had raised, someone he considered family, betray him so completely? Even meals became a source of torment. Sam found himself eating alone in silence, the clinking of cutlery against plates echoing through the empty house. Loneliness and anxiety gnawed at him, each bite tasteless, each day heavier than the last. Friends offered sympathy, but their concern did little to fill the void left by his nephew's betrayal. One afternoon, Sam decided to go through his old financial files, the same meticulous records he had maintained for decades. He sifted through folders of savings accounts, investments, and trust documents. Linda's face wasn't involved this time, but Brian's shadow loomed over everything. Still, as he combed through the papers, a spark of hope began to flicker. Among the files, Sam found documents Brian had never touched, hidden investments, conservative funds, and legal protections he had put in place years ago, anticipating that someone might try to manipulate his generosity. For decades, he had quietly safeguarded his assets, ensuring that even in the hands of a deceitful family member, his hard work could not be completely undone. A slow smile spread across Sam's face, tinged with relief and resolve. He realized that while Brian thought he had won, the tables were quietly shifting. He had the tools, the documents, and the knowledge to reclaim control. The betrayal, as painful as it had been, had not destroyed him. It had only strengthened his resolve. Sitting by the window, Sam whispered to himself, the rain outside matching the storm in his mind. "They think they can take advantage of me, but they think they can take advantage of me, but they first underestimated everything I've built, everything I've protected. I will not be broken. And soon, Brian will see that greed and deceit have consequences. The loneliness, the anxiety, the sleepless nights, all of it became fuel for determination. Uncle Sam knew that the confrontation would come, and when it did, he would be ready. The seed of betrayal had been planted, but it would grow into a reckoning that would restore his dignity and deliver justice in a way that Brian would never forget. One quiet evening, Uncle Sam sat at his study desk, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating decades of meticulous records. The rain outside mirrored the storm in his mind, a mixture of anxiety, betrayal, and simmering determination. Brian's lies, manipulations, and empty promises had left him shaken, but Sam was far from defeated. He opened a folder marked Investments, Confidential, one he had kept hidden from prying eyes, even from family members. Inside were statements and legal papers from conservative funds, savings accounts, and small investment ventures he had quietly nurtured over the years. These were the assets Brian had assumed he could control, the resources he thought were vulnerable to his schemes. As Sam carefully reviewed the papers, a spark of relief and triumph grew in his chest. His years of careful planning, legal foresight, and financial discipline had created a safety net so strong that Brian's manipulation could not touch it. Every investment Brian had tried to access was legally protected, insulated by trusts and accounts that only Sam could control. Then Sam found a notarized letter from his lawyer, dated several months earlier. Dear Mr. 732. Sam, your assets are fully protected under your trust. Any unauthorized attempts to access or manipulate your funds are legally null and void. Your investments, savings, and properties remain under your control, and any attempt to bypass this will be challenged in court. Sam's hands shook with excitement and vindication. So, all this time he thought he could outsmart me, he murmured, and yet everything he tried is useless. He leaned back in his chair, allowing himself a quiet, victorious smile. Brian's greed and impatience had blinded him, but Sam's patience and foresight had quietly turned the tables. The betrayal that had caused so many sleepless nights was now powerless to harm him. Just then his phone rang. Hesitant, but resolute, Sam answered. Mr. Sam, said the lawyer's calm voice. I wanted to confirm that everything remains secure. Any attempts by your nephew to access your accounts have been flagged and are legally invalid. You're completely protected. Thank you, Sam replied, his voice steady, tinged with satisfaction. It seems the lesson he needs is about to arrive. Sitting quietly in his study, Uncle Sam allowed himself a moment to absorb the truth. He had been wronged, manipulated, and betrayed. But he had the power now. Brian's arrogance and deceit had underestimated decades of wisdom and preparation. He whispered to himself, a slow, determined smile spreading across his face. They think they have won, but soon, Brian will learn the true cost of greed and betrayal. The next morning, Uncle Sam sat calmly in his study, the stack of trust documents and investment statements neatly arranged on the desk. Brian burst in, full of his usual confidence, expecting to find Sam anxious, vulnerable, and still under his control. Uncle Sam, where are my returns? I thought I'd double your savings weeks ago, Brian barked, slamming his hands on the desk. Sam looked up slowly, his eyes steady and unflinching. Brian, it's time you face the truth. Everything you thought you controlled is out of your reach. Brian laughed nervously. Out of my reach? What are you talking about? Have invested your money, your hard-earned money. You'll see soon, it's going to multiply. No, Brian, Sam replied firmly, lifting the documents. Every attempt you made to manipulate my savings is legally invalid. The accounts, the investments, the properties, all fully protected. Your schemes will gain you nothing. Brian's face paled as he scanned the papers, his confidence faltered. What? How? This isn't possible. It's very possible, Sam said calmly. I anticipated the greed, the manipulation. I prepared for it. And now, the consequences of your actions are here for you to see. Brian sank into a chair, his bravado gone. I didn't think I never imagined you'd protect everything so perfectly. Sam's lips curved into a quiet, satisfied smile. Greed blinds people, Brian. You believed you could take advantage of me because you thought I was vulnerable. But patience, foresight, and integrity are stronger than deception and arrogance. You've learned a hard lesson today. Brian buried his face in his hands, shame and regret washing over him. I've been selfish. I betrayed your trust. I'm sorry, he whispered, voice breaking. Sam leaned back, calm and dignified. It's too late for apologies, but I hope this teaches you humility. Remember, actions have consequences. Those who exploit love and trust for personal gain will eventually face justice. The tension in the room lifted, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of vindication. Sam had endured manipulation, stress, and betrayal, yet he emerged unbroken, his dignity intact. Stepping toward the window, Sam inhaled the crisp morning air, the sunlight warming his face. He whispered to himself, a soft smile spreading across his features. I have been wronged, but I am not defeated. I am strong, wise, and finally, at peace. Brian sat silently, humbled and ashamed, realizing for the first time the true cost of his greed and deception. Uncle Sam's patience and foresight had won, and justice had been served. And just when you think justice has been served, the final story will leave you speechless. A neglected grandma, an ungrateful son, and a secret that changed everything. The morning sun crept over the quiet suburban street, but inside Grandma Lillian's small living room, the air was heavy with tension. At 72, Lillian had lived a life of love, care, and sacrifice for her family. Yet, the person she had devoted most of her energy to, her son David, 40, had become the source of her heartbreak. "Mom, are you seriously still sitting there?" David snapped, slamming his briefcase onto the table. "I've been calling you for an hour. You're supposed to help me with the house plans." Lillian looked up, her hands trembling slightly around her knitting. "David, I was just resting." "I thought, resting?" David barked. "We don't have time for your breaks. You can't just sit around doing nothing all day while I manage everything. You're supposed to help me, Mom, not waste my time." Lillian's heart sank. She had spent decades supporting David. School projects, late-night homework, college fees, every small and large sacrifice a mother could make. And now, after everything, he spoke to her with contempt. "David, I've done my best for you all my life," Lillian said softly, voice shaking. "I raised you, cared for you, and gave you everything I could. I thought that you would understand." David rolled his eyes, stepping closer, his tone dripping with frustration. "Understand? Mom, I don't have time for this. You're lazy, useless, and frankly a burden. If you can't keep up, maybe it's time to move out and leave me to handle things properly." Lillian's chest tightened. The words cut deeper than any physical pain. The son she had nurtured, guided, and loved unconditionally now called her a burden. Her hands shook as tears threatened to spill, but she held them back, swallowing her grief. You're my son," she whispered, voice cracking. "And yet, I feel like I've lost you to greed and arrogance. How did it come to this?" David scoffed, picking up a stack of papers. "Mom, I don't have time to coddle you. Get your act together, or find somewhere else to sit." The door slammed behind him, leaving Lillian alone in the room. The quiet was deafening. She stared at the empty doorway, the weight of years of love met with ingratitude pressing on her chest. Yet, even amid the despair, a tiny spark flickered in her heart. She thought of the lessons her late husband had taught her. Strength and patience will always outlast cruelty. Clutching her knitting tightly, Lillian whispered to herself, a quiet determination forming in her eyes. "They may think they can discard me, but I am not powerless. And one day they will see the consequences of their actions." Days turned into weeks, and Grandma Lillian's home felt colder than ever. The lively warmth that had once filled her life, the laughter of family, the gentle chatter over meals, had vanished. David's harsh words echoed in her mind constantly: lazy, useless, burden. Every corner of her small home reminded her of what had been lost: respect, love, and appreciation. She tried to maintain her routines, tending to her small garden and preparing meals she often ate alone. But even the chores that once brought her comfort now felt like a reminder of how invisible she had become. Each wilted flower or unfinished dish seemed to mirror her own neglected spirit. When Lillian tried to reach out to David, offering help or asking for a kind word, he would respond with impatience or irritation. "Mom, I don't have time for this. Stop wasting my energy," he would snap. Even her gentle efforts to engage him in conversation or share family memories were met with disinterest or sarcasm. Even neighbors who once stopped for friendly visits seemed hesitant to intervene. "She's family," they would say when asked about David's behavior. "Maybe he's stressed." Their words, though polite, did nothing to heal the ache of betrayal in Lillian's heart. She felt trapped in her own home, alone with the person she had raised and nurtured the most. Mealtimes became especially painful. She would carefully set the table, hoping for a small moment of connection or gratitude, only to be met with silence or criticism. The food, once a labor of love, grew cold on her plate. Her heart ached not from hunger, but from the weight of rejection. At night, Lillian would sit by the window, watching families laugh outside, children play, and neighbors greet one another warmly. She recalled moments from David's childhood, his first steps, school recitals, the excitement in his eyes on Christmas mornings, and felt the sharp sting of loss. How had the boy she had cherished become a man so callous and indifferent? Yet, even in her despair, a small ember of hope began to glow. Lillian remembered her late husband's words. Strength is not shown in fury, but in patience and preparation. Those who act cruelly will one day face the consequences. Driven by that memory, Lillian began sorting through her old papers, letters, and documents she had carefully preserved over the years. Hidden among them were bank statements, small investments, and a notarized will. Things David had never noticed, dismissed as irrelevant, or assumed he could control. As she reviewed the documents, a spark of determination lit her eyes. She realized that though David had tried to dominate her, he had overlooked one crucial fact. She had planned for this. Her years of careful foresight and patience had created a safety net that would allow her to reclaim her dignity and even deliver the justice that had long eluded her. Sitting quietly in the dim light, Lillian whispered to herself, her voice steady despite the tears that still welled in her eyes. They may think they have discarded me, but I am far from powerless. They will learn, and one day, justice will be mine. The loneliness, the betrayal, and the exhaustion of endless struggle had not defeated her. Instead, they had forged a resolve as strong as steel. Grandma Lillian knew that soon, the storm of her suffering would transform into a reckoning, one that David could never ignore. One quiet afternoon, Grandma Lillian sat at her kitchen table, the soft sunlight filtering through the curtains. Her heart, heavy from weeks of neglect and cruelty, began to beat with a new rhythm, a rhythm of quiet determination. David had thought he could dominate her, control her, and dismiss her entirely. But Lillian knew she had a secret advantage he had never suspected. She opened a small locked drawer she rarely touched, pulling out folders of carefully preserved documents, bank statements, investment records, and most importantly, a notarized copy of her will. Over the years she had quietly safeguarded her assets, anticipating that those closest to her might not always act in good faith. Her eyes widened as she scanned the documents. The accounts she had kept in secret, savings, conservative investments, and even a small inheritance, were completely protected by legal trust arrangements. Any attempt by David to access them would be legally impossible. Everything he had assumed he could claim was untouchable. Then Lillian unfolded the most important document, her secret will. Unlike what David had believed, none of her estate would go to him. Instead, she had designated charities and friends who had supported her through life, rewarding those who had shown kindness and foresight while denying the greedy their reward. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Hesitant," she answered. "Mrs. Lillian," said the calm voice of her lawyer, "just confirming that your accounts and your will are fully secured. Any unauthorized attempts to access your finances are legally invalid. You are completely protected." "Thank you," Lillian replied, a soft, triumphant smile spreading across her face. "It seems the time for lessons has finally come." She hung up and leaned back in her chair, taking a deep breath. The storm of betrayal that had raged through her heart was now transforming into strategy and empowerment. She could see it clearly, the neglect, the cruelty, the ungratefulness. David had underestimated her patience, her foresight, and her strength. A slow, determined smile spread across Lillian's face. She whispered to herself, her voice firm and resolute, "They think they've taken everything from me, but soon they will learn that deceit and ingratitude carry a price. I am ready, justice will be mine." The quiet of the house felt different now, charged, almost electric, as if the walls themselves sensed the coming reckoning. Grandma Lillian's moment had arrived. The stage was set for the confrontation that would restore her dignity, deliver David's long overdue regret, and bring closure to a life of hardship endured with patience and love. The next morning, Grandma Lillian stood in her living room, calm, composed, and resolute. David stormed in, his face flushed with impatience and frustration, expecting to find his mother anxious, scared, or easy to intimidate. "Mom, where's my money? I've been waiting weeks." "You said you'd help me," David shouted, slamming his hands onto the coffee table. Lillian looked up steadily, her eyes shining with quiet authority. "David, it's time you understand that actions have consequences. Everything you thought you could take or control is out of your reach." David's expression shifted from frustration to confusion. What are you talking about? I manage your accounts. I invested your money. Everything was under my control." "No, David," Lillian said firmly, placing the stack of legal documents, bank statements, and her notarized will on the table. "Every account, every investment, every property is fully protected under legal trust arrangements. And as for inheritance, none of it will go to you. Instead, I've chosen those who have shown kindness, patience, and respect throughout my life. David's eyes widened, disbelief morphing into panic. No, this can't be. You're leaving me nothing? Lillian's lips curved into a calm, confident smile. You've been selfish, cruel, and ungrateful. You thought I was powerless because you underestimated patience, wisdom, and foresight. But greed blinds people, David. And now, the truth is here. David sank into a chair, his arrogance dissolving into shame. I never realized I treated you terribly. I didn't think about anything but myself, he whispered, voice breaking. Lillian's voice was soft but firm. It's too late for excuses. Let this be a lesson. Disrespect, cruelty, and greed will always carry a price. Actions have consequences, and you are experiencing yours. The tension in the room lifted, replaced by a sense of vindication. Lillian had endured betrayal, neglect, and emotional torment, but she emerged triumphant. She had not only protected her life's work but also ensured that justice, long overdue, had been served. Stepping toward the window, she inhaled the crisp morning air, sunlight warming her face. She whispered to herself, a quiet smile spreading across her features. I have been wronged, but I am strong. I am respected. I am finally free. David sat in stunned silence, the weight of his mistakes settling heavily upon him. For the first time, he understood the cost of ingratitude and cruelty. Grandma Lillian's patience, wisdom, and careful planning had outlasted his selfishness, delivering justice and restoring her dignity once and for all. Stories like these remind us of one powerful truth: karma never forgets, and kindness is always rewarded. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video. Comment below which story shocked you the most, and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories where justice always finds a way.